In the summer of 1973, 42 students graduated from Dunfield High School in Chicago. But according to every official record, the classroom they came from never existed. If you enjoy real-life mysteries that the public was never meant to know, subscribe and join the channel, because what you're about to hear was buried for 50 years. But let's go back to where it all began. The first strange thing appeared in 1979. A remodeling project at Dunfield High required moving old cabinets and repainting the east wing. Behind a sealed wall, construction workers found a worn-out plaque that read, Room 313, Class of 1973. The problem was, in every version of the school's architectural plans, there had never been a Room 313. When Principal Harold Beringer was shown the plaque, he reportedly went pale and ordered the site closed. That afternoon, the maintenance staff quietly removed the sign and boarded up the area again. But word spread among teachers and former students faster than the administration expected. One of them was Ellen Trace, who had graduated in 1973. When she heard the news, she called the school, insisting there must be some mistake. She still had her yearbook, her class photo, and her diploma, all labeled Room 313. The administration told her it must have been a printing error. She didn't believe that for a second. Ellen's husband later claimed she became obsessed. She contacted several of her former classmates, trying to verify her memories. Most of them refused to talk. A few said they did remember the room, but things about it seemed off. One recalled that every morning the classroom door was locked on the inside, and that their teacher, a woman named Ms. Warren, kept the lights dim even during daytime. The more Ellen investigated, the stranger became. She learned that Ms. Warren had resigned right after graduation, leaving no forwarding address. When Ellen looked up her old teacher's employment record at the Department of Education, she discovered something chilling. There was no record of any teacher named Catherine Warren ever working in the state of Illinois. By 1980, Ellen's notes filled 2 boxes of paper. She marked down names, dates, and addresses of every classmate she could find. But as she began reaching out to them again, several phones were disconnected. 2 families had moved without a trace. Then she read an obituary. One of her classmates had died in a fire the previous year. A week later, another was reported missing. In September 1981, Ellen's sister told police that Ellen hadn't come home. Her car was found abandoned near the Des Plaines River, keys still in ignition. The local paper called it a probable suicide. But her friends swore she'd been scared, not depressed. One of them told a reporter. She said someone was following her. Someone who didn't want her to talk about Room 313. For years, the story stayed buried. A local urban legend, half remembered by those who graduated in the early 70s. The school was rebuilt twice. The east wing was demolished. Nobody mentioned the plaque again. Until last winter, when a former janitor came forward with an old photograph that changed everything. There in black and white stood a group of smiling students in front of a classroom door clearly marked 313, a door the blueprint swore had never been built. By the spring of 1982, the case had faded for most people who knew Dunfield High. But for Detective April Knox of the Chicago PD, it was a loose thread she couldn't let go. Knox had been assigned to a string of disappearances across Cook County, most of them involving men and women in their late 20s with only 2 common links. All had attended Dunfield, and every single one listed their homeroom as 313. Knox wasn't the sort to believe in ghosts or conspiracies. But either someone had erased traces of a room from every blueprint ever made, or everyone who remembered it was lying. The paperwork left her angry. How could a public high school operate a classroom whose finances, staff, and student records simply didn't exist? She began tracking down families and knocking on doors. But the responses were always the same. Nobody wanted to talk about Room 313. The doors would close, voices would drop. Some residents outright refused to answer questions. Twice, Knox received anonymous notes warning her to give up the search or risk losing her job. Once, someone left a dead sparrow on her windshield, something local gangs use as a threat. Still, Knox kept digging. The deeper she went, the darker things grew. She interviewed a former janitor named Salvatore D'Angelo, the man who had brought forward the photograph. Sal said he remembered how, in the early hours before graduation, he would hear muffled voices behind the locked door, voices that sometimes didn't sound like teenagers at all. The principal, Beringer, had paid Sal extra to keep quiet and avoid the east hallway during those times. Knox tracked down the photograph's origin. The image had been processed at a local pharmacy in July 1973, but the envelope was signed K. Warren. The store manager had no record matching the name. When Knox tried the Department of Education, the clerk told her the files for teachers from the early 1970s had been archived, but insisted there was no Catherine Warren. Days later, one of Knox's sources called in a tip. An abandoned home in the suburbs might have once belonged to Ms. Warren. The place was run down, windows shattered, the mailbox stuffed with 10-year-old ads. But inside, Knox found VHS tapes stacked in a closet, most labeled 313. Audio was mostly static, except for one chilling fragment. A voice whispering, "They shouldn't be here." Knox requested a forensic analysis from the lab, but the tapes yielded little. Still, rumors spread. A local newspaper ran the headline, "Classroom that never was linked to missing alumni." The city council received complaints about Knox's intrusive investigation. Funding for her research was slashed. Late one night, her apartment was broken into. Items were moved, but nothing was taken. The only thing out of place was a single photograph taped to her mirror, Dunfield students, their faces lined out with red marker, and the number 313 scrawled beneath them. Convinced she was close to something, Knox refused to stop. What she didn't know, what nobody outside a handful of surviving alumni knew, was that the truth behind room 313 was about to catch up, and for one former student, the clock was running out. The cold truth surfaced one evening in May 1982. Detective Knox received an urgent midnight call from Sal D'Angelo. He'd hidden something all these years, and now his conscience was breaking. They met in the shadowed alley behind Stony Avenue. Sal handed her a faded envelope, trembling as he spoke. "They told me never to show this, but I can't keep quiet anymore." Inside were 6 Polaroids. Every image showed the same faces featured in the yearbook, grouped by the room 313 plaque. But in the final picture, the students weren't smiling. Their eyes were downcast, and one, Gregory Sumner, was visibly bruised. Sal explained at the graduation rehearsal he'd seen Principal Beringer drag 2 students, including Gregory, out of sight. Afterward, neither attended the ceremony. There was no police report. Their families were told the boys had run away. Knox needed verification. She traced Gregory's surviving relatives, who were reluctant to speak. His older sister finally confessed, voice heavy with fear. "We found him weeks later, dead, floating in the Calumet River. They called it an accident. The school made us sign papers to keep it quiet. Records from a medical examiner confirmed the cause of death was drowning, but extensive bruises and evidence of restraint were never investigated." Dunfield High's administration buried the story, telling the family their grief would fade if left alone. Knox's investigation accelerated. The Chicago Tribune published a bombshell expose, mystery death and missing students linked to non-existent classroom. Public outrage followed, but the school's legal team went into overdrive, threatening lawsuits and claiming the photos were doctored. All the while, a second family contacted Knox. Their daughter, Leah Winton, also from room 313, had disappeared 2 days after Gregory's death. Her body was never found. Sal revealed a final secret: a blood-stained piece of carpet pulled from room 313 on the night before the graduation. He'd kept it hidden in a garage for a decade, haunted by guilt. When forensics tested the carpet, DNA matched both Gregory and Leah. The classroom had, beyond any doubt, witnessed violence the city never acknowledged. Knox pressed harder, but as she prepared subpoenas with surviving school officials, one of her sources, another former student, Alan McGill, was found dead in his apartment. The coroner called it suicide. Knox suspected otherwise. Fear gripped everyone involved. Still, it wasn't enough to silence the revelation. Room 313 became a symbol for trauma, loss, and the secret crimes that institutions could hide for decades. The alumni who survived scattered. No reunion was ever organized. Knox's report was buried but leaked through underground channels. sparking rumors that still echo in Chicago today. The greatest horror wasn't just the violence, but the absolute, relentless erasure of anything or anyone connected to the classroom that officially never existed. Detective April Knox's relentless pursuit of the truth came with a mounting cost. After her exposé shook Chicago's conscience, the shadows surrounding Dunfield High twisted darker. Accounts from former students grew cryptic. One man, Richard Holden, contacted Knox with a trembling voice, alleging that room 313 was more than a location. It was a symbol of years of hidden abuse and manipulation by powerful men in the community. Richard claimed many survivors feared public exposure. Their silence was bought with threats, bribes, or worse, disappearance. Knox learned several more former students had vanished under mysterious circumstances in the years following graduation, their names quietly scrubbed from records or dismissed as voluntary disappearances. A scan through school board archives revealed buried meeting minutes, where members expressed urgent concern over allegations that could destroy the school's reputation. Legal memos, marked confidential, outlined strategies to discredit whistleblowers and force settlements under gag orders. The investigation wasn't just uncovering a secret classroom. It had trespassed into a fortress of systemic complicity. Knox's own office was repeatedly broken into, sensitive evidence was tampered with, and an anonymous package arrived one cold morning. Inside was a single sheet of faded notepad paper with a typed message. Stop digging or the next name you hear will be yours. Despite warnings, Knox received quiet help from unlikely allies, an editor at the Chicago Tribune risking her career, a retired school janitor whose conscience finally outweighed his fear, and a former teacher who hinted at meetings long ago, attended by faceless men, deciding the fate of struggling students in room 313. Most damning were the testimonials from now middle-aged alumni who described surreal experiences with their math teacher, Ms. Warren. One recalled waking in a dim classroom to find classmates missing, replaced by whispered voices telling her to forget. Another spoke of cryptic symbols scratched inside desks that matched patterns in police evidence files. The picture grew horrifying. Room 313 stood as a hidden chamber where the limits of human cruelty were tested and erased from all official history. Knox pieced together that the school's management deliberately forgot the room to cover up horrend acts shielded by city officials and powerful families. The final breakthrough came with digital forensics on an old-school computer disk recovered from a discarded archive crate. It contained internal correspondence referencing Project 313 and detailed plans to erase physical evidence and rewrite the past, an agreement signed by key figures who were still influential. But as Knox prepared to make this explosive information public, a shadow fell. Former students she'd interviewed began withdrawing or disappearing, their lives unraveling under invisible pressure. The same silence Ellen Trace had fought against decades earlier was tightening its grip again. Only this time, Knox was caught in the center. The classroom that never existed was more than a room. It was a haunting memory, a warning etched into Chicago's darkest corners, one that screamed to be remembered even as the city worked hard to forget. As summer 1983 settled over Chicago, Detective April Knox stood on the precipice of exposing a truth buried by decades of silence and fear. Every piece of evidence, every missing student, every faded photograph pointed to one inescapable reality. Room 313 was a chamber of unspoken horrors meticulously erased from history. Knox arranged a press conference, prepared to share documents that revealed Project 313, a school board scheme to cover up abuse and deaths tied to powerful figures. Yet, before the cameras could roll, her phone rang. The voice was distorted, cold. "Let this go, or the next tragedy will be yours." That night, Knox's apartment was ransacked, but one item remained untouched, a small, handwritten note clipped to her desk lamp. It read simply, "We never forgot." Undeterred, Knox went public. The story ignited citywide outrage. Former officials were questioned, new investigations launched. Survivors found voices to tell their stories. Yet, victory was bittersweet. Some witnesses vanished. Others claimed the scars ran deeper than anyone imagined. Ellen Trace's yearbooks and diplomas were displayed in museum exhibits honoring survivors. Yet, the final mystery lingered. The physical room 313 was never found. The wall behind which the plaque had appeared remained sealed tight, a silent sentinel to buried secrets. Knox closed the case file with a warning typed across the summary page. Some rooms, like some truths, refused to be erased, but silence and forgetting remained the deadliest locks of all. Room 313 wasn't just a missing classroom on a blueprint. It was a testament to those silenced, a space that existed in fear and memory, a shadow etched forever into the city's dark past. And while the classroom never existed on paper, it will never be forgotten